And we are now off with chapter 4 of our Benko crash course, where we will be delving into the first cb5 chapter. So we got cb5 here on move 4, and this is the accepted Benko gambit. Actually, some people refer to the accepted only after a6 ba, as actually here in this particular case, a6. This whole chapter will be spent on analyzing the fifth move of white's b6, which is one of the more popular sidelines here after cb, and is very, very noteworthy. It's very important to take a deeper look here as to what is going on. So basically, it's not that difficult here to equalize, but I believe it's very, very difficult to win. These positions are very drawish. I've actually also had a game here around 2 months ago. I was playing for a win with the Benko gambit, but my opponent kind of dried things up here a little bit with this particular sideline, and the game kind of petered out to some sort of a draw there later on. So e6 is basically the best, and yeah, I believe just by far the best option here. There's probably some other move there, but yeah, just about everybody plays e6. And mostly folks will play knight c3. That's basically the idea. But let us take a look, for the sake of completeness, what happens if white decides on de6. Obviously, we'll take with the f-pawn here. And let's say two ways to play, knight c3 being, let's say, the main one here. g3, another option to keeping the knight's options open. Maybe the knight will try to go to d2, as we'll see in one case here. So d5, this is the standard way to play again. Bishop g2, and this is the recommended development pattern. Also, after knight c3 there, yeah, it's just very comfortable, and I think black is just doing very, very well here. Knight h3 castles, knight f4, queen takes b6 castles, knight c6, b3, and rook b8, so all kind of like very, very easy moves to make. This position is, kind of intuitive. And note that black is not down a pawn compared to some of the other versions of this, and we'll actually take a look in one of the future chapters at a similar position where there's no a6 pawn. Actually, there's a white a6 pawn here. So kind of a big difference, but of course there's also some benefits even there, because there's open file for black's rook. So yeah, again, dramatically different position from that. And, it basically calls for some kind of a unique way to play here. And one important point I'm trying to make here is after bishop b2, it's very important to play rook d8 and not bishop d7. Bishop d7 is, we can be kind of tempted to play this move, but now the point is that bishop d7 usually comes after knight c3. Why? Well, because now there's knight d2. Sorry about that. Bishop d7. Yeah, now there's knight d2 with e4 coming and knight c4. When knight is on c3, the knight tries to go to a4 instead very often, and our bishop is right there to kind of counteract that. That's basically the whole point. But after rook d8 there, again, like basically black is doing, perfectly fine. Yeah, rook d8, e3, and d4 with great, great counterplay. Let's try to, take a look at this position a little bit deeper. Like what is going on here? Very, very unclear. But, the point is black is basically trying to play e5, get this bishop out here, and just, establish a strong center, forcing white on the defense. White, meanwhile, may try to kind of, play some kind of maybe knight d2, knight c4 idea, or, things like that. And, position is very dynamically equal, let's say. Knight c3, then queen b6, we take the pawn again, g3 and d5, bishop g2, and the familiar now pattern, bishop e7. Now there's two ways of getting this knight out. There's this knight h3, very interesting idea of, maybe bringing it over to f4, maybe g5, mostly f4. And there's also knight f3, kind of the shorter way, and, also just kind of a logical way to go. Let's try to start with this move, knight h3. There was actually my blitz game here from this year. Castles, knight c6, b3, and now bishop d7 is totally fine, like I said, because this knight is already on c3. Knight f4. Yeah, now there's like a couple options here. I chose this move, which is a little bit odd perhaps, but I just wasn't sure like how else to play here. Obviously, I have no e5. g5 is probably too risky. Yeah, so I gotta like somehow, develop my pieces here. I'm trying for c4, but not yet, obviously, as that would run into bc. So maybe I'm trying to wait for the bishop. Maybe, put an extra defender to the c4 square. Yeah, something along those lines. 95, now bishop a3. My opponent kind of consciously places the bishop here instead. Rook a to b8. Rook c1. Bishop d6. Bishop b2 and c4 with nice counterplay here for black. So white's kind of fed up with having to put this bishop here, where it's just there's not many perspectives. I have properly defended this pawn. I'm ready to even bolster it here from behind, and my opponent kind of like allows me to play this c4, which basically I end up winning the game later on. But the middle game here is not that interesting actually. So in basically Gunter's stop at chess.com blitz 22-4. Yeah, there's black is doing very, very well here. So very basic development pattern, but nonetheless, very important how to place the pieces here to kind of strive for some kind of an active play. Knight c6, castles, my castle, and b3. So again, super familiar, very, very much in the same spirit. Bishop d7, now white's not afraid here to kick the queen out of b6 to a7. Bishop b2, a5 this time. Trying to maybe, most likely black will end up playing on the queen side. e3. Usually in these structures, if white can afford to play e4 and try to break this, that can lead to a good position, but not always. Very often, maybe I can try to ignore, play d4, and just kind of play with that kind of center. So it's very much of it's a game of weak squares around the center. This pawn is kind of maybe in trouble later on. Currently, it's still well defended, but it may be a liability. And of course, on black's positive side, if black gets to roll these pawns forward, then there could be good things happening later. Rook a c8, rook c1, king h8, basically, with a very, very comfortable equal position here. Black properly defends all of the weak squares. There's no easy way to try to touch these pawns. Bishop a3 will basically run with knight b4 with a counter threat. Bishop grabbing a4. Then ba c4 will probably be a very, very good version of this position for black. So neither move is particularly scary here. Knight c3, just very simple approach, and the position is totally fine. So that was our brief consideration of the de6 move here on move 6. And now basically on to knight c3. This is the main story. And now ed. So bishop b7, I believe, runs into e4. It's just not the kind of position you want to have. This is white's intention. And try to play bishop c4, knight e2 or f3. Castles, maybe h3, depending on whether the bishop wants to come to g4 or not. And, grab some kind of a piece play control with bishop f4, bishop g5, things like that. Maybe even the e file. So those positions can be very uncomfortable, and we basically don't enter them. So that's why e takes d5. Knight d5 takes queen d5 and knight c6. And now two ways to go, mainly e4, mainly knight f3, but e4 may lead to a transposition, or, if white wants to go in a different direction, like bishop e7, bishop c4, bishop e7 note is quite important. If bishop to c4 was to be delivered now, yeah, that could probably be quite unfortunate for black, who force some move like this, which can be just not so great. That's why we play bishop e7, bishop c4, now we castle, and knight e2. Knight f3 would be a transpo, and basically we will be studying this position in just a second. Knight e2, rook b8, knight c3. So, also logical, and white is trying to remaneuver the knight onto the best possible outpost, and it is necessary to know how to react with black. Rook b6 castles, d6, queen d1, bishop f6, knight d5, rook b8, rook b1, bishop e6, b3, bishop d4, and bishop e3. So basically, black kind of like found some ways around it, you can argue. Just basically, black is okay with the knight being on d5, but, found like ways to kind of place his own pieces accordingly. And this knight is actually not so great. It won't be able to deliver big advantage for white, just because of how active black's pieces are. And there's also the counterplay, perhaps later on we'll see this a5, a4, try to trade things off, featured in the future. But also this position is just very difficult to play for a win with black. It's something I got to realize. It's basically just, it has like a drawish tendency to it, and there's just no plan. Like white just doesn't have a way to lose. That's basically was my conclusion, but very tough for white to win as well. So, it's kind of one of those more, let's say, adventurously dry. It's not the most symmetrical or whatever kind of position, but it just happens to have these like drawish tendencies here. So bishop e3, we take, knight e3 and a5, queen d2, knight d4, knight back, h6, rook f1, and there's, I think, many ways to kind of try to get an equal position. Yeah, queen g5 is one interesting way, taking advantage of the fact that queen a5 runs into this pinned fork, so white doesn't have the resources for that. Queen d3, bishop d5, and king h8. And yeah, this kind of a, slightly imbalanced in that there's these like, there's bishop against the knight. The pawn structure is kind of like, a little bit exotic. But yeah, even here, I mean, it's just like very likely to trade off and just kind of lead to some sort of an equalish position. Yeah, so, but you're playing black. White is not the most ambitious here in his endeavors. Well, there's just not that much we can do sometimes, and that draw is basically good. So that was the immediate e4, and now off for our very, very main consideration, and that is the move knight f3. There's a plethora of ideas here ahead, and let's just get right into it. Rook b8, I think, is the best way to go. So there's still time, to defend against some knight g5. Like we just got enough resources to do that, or like knight e5, and then we just get out of the spin of this knight. Bishop e7 is a way to go. And knight f3, bishop e7, but it's dubious, I believe, after this. White will get a favorable version of this ending. I think it's slightly, superior to the usual version that we will see in just a second. Yeah, I think with this b7 especially, forcing the bishop onto this weird square b7, kind of like, becoming a pawn here, one of these three. Yeah, so like this position should favor white a little bit, but not much, actually. After this bishop f6, bishop d4, powerful remaneuver idea, placing the bishop on d4 square, I guess, does give some counterplay. Again, there's drawish tendency even here. That is why it's only a dubious, mark here, not a question mark. King e2, a5, bishop e3 is plus over equal, basically slight advantage. But I think it's like plus 2, plus 0.2, plus 0.3. There's more than enough ideas that black has to try to draw this, but obviously there's just no way to win. Just look at this position. I mean, basically black has to play for a draw here, kind of a two results for white. Yeah, so there is some discomfort, a slightly unpleasant position. I don't think anybody would voluntarily like to play this with black. There's definitely some kind of strategic suffering ahead. So bishop e7 is definitely not a great move. But rook b8 is very, very nice and comfortable. And we'll see this. The rook basically, is ready to recapture this pawn, enter the game, even some kind of rook lifting ideas. And, so from here on, like with the kind of a, I think, now there's basically it branches out into two ways to go for white, neither of which is particularly scary. We will see how to basically react to that. So let us just get to it. Let's take a look first at the knight e5. There is less popular this move, but nonetheless, I think not without its poison. Now, this move for black is logical enough. Queen f6. Of course, we do not want to, run into this basic fork. Now, queen f6 is simple enough. Forcing knight c6, and now dc. I guess an important move. We don't capture with a queen, and this position with queens is very nice and comfortable. Now, white, I think, has to be more careful. Black's moves are couldn't be easier actually. So yeah, so this one not scary at all. Yeah, like maybe, you know, some player could be tempted to try this sideline because of these double pawns, and the pawn is not recaptured yet. There's some plausibility, but once we see just how active these bishops are and how weak the queenside pawns are for white, we'll realize that there's nothing to be afraid of. E3 is one way to go wrong for white actually. Now bishop f5 is already slightly better. Queen c4 now will basically get a fantastic position here. Bishop e6, queen c2, h6. We don't want to lose that pawn by any means, obviously. And castles, yeah, with basically initiative, like, you know, with the pointedness of these pieces. Yeah, it's very, very good. The bishop is undeveloped and passive. So e3 is just not good. And g3 will be just like full of equalities here. Let's see. Castles, bishop g2, rook b6, castles, bishop e6. Now white would obviously want to finish development somehow, but that is not possible. So bishop f4 has to be okay with losing some material. Rook b4, I think even better than grabbing the pawn. Of course, rook b2 is not possible because of bishop e5. Oh, queen b2 actually neither is possible, I believe, for rook ab1. Yes, so rook b4 and bishop e5. Otherwise, we'll be grabbing on b2 already, so yeah, bishop e5 is necessary. And now queen g5 is that precise way to go. And now, you know, it's basically this repetition. And if black wants to continue, he can actually with this move queen g6. Very interesting move. Kind of like saying that, you know, we're going to get this b2 pawn and then try to get the c pawn going. But this is still very equal. But, you know, some of these positions actually are winnable. I think more than losable. So this equality, queen g6 could be a nice try, especially if white is the kind of player who just wanted to grab a repetition here and draw quickly. We could persist with the move queen g6 and try to demonstrate our strengths. One way is queen takes g6, we take, and b3. I think if bishop c6 now, then rook b2 with this double attack is already advantage. So b3, and now we basically force c4. Bishop d2, rook b6, bishop e3, and we basically go. We don't want that draw. But now, yeah, with the precise moves, there's just nothing we can do at this point. We take, takes. Rook c5 with very, very trivial equality and essentially a draw here. Queen g6, let's say white is scared of this ending and wants to grab a free pawn. Of course, it's not free. Rook b2, queen a6, and now c4 will basically give the necessary counterplay. So maybe white actually now starts, you know, seeing some winning ideas as well. This pawn, if advanced, coupled with the bishop's support, could be lethal, but there is enough for us here also. We take this pawn and just go active, bishop c5. So now basically the problem is the king may struggle. Some queen c2 idea. Yeah, this can be problematic. Pawn is not advanced enough. Queen c6. Bishop looks at the rook. Rook a d1. Queen f6 with very unclear position. a6 c3. Now there's no a7. Bishop f3. And rook back behind the pawn. Yeah, it becomes very unfeasible for white to advance. Queen e4. Rook d8. Bishop e3. Now after these exchanges, takes on d8. Queen d8. Queen e3. And there's just nothing better than this. We grab, and again, trivial equality. So this is basically like the limit here of these positions, so to speak. And, you know, it peters out to this kind of a dull draw after some, you know, very interesting strategic play earlier on. But you can imagine these, you know, this getting even more complex. So I think objectively it's kind of close to 0-0. But yeah, this I guess can be won, maybe even lost as well. Yeah, this is kind of both-sided. Like maybe the pawn can be, let's say, there might be some idea of this sort. Now that I think of it, well, there is not, because concrete. Oh, rook a2 is interesting. Yeah, there's queen b1. Yeah, so here, like actually, that would be a problem. Yeah, see, so there's some danger even if white tries to like be creative here. Yeah, so this position basically balanced, but not very clear. I mean, not very like not one of those easiest, driest positions out there. And finally, queen e3, another interesting idea, rook b2 and bishop e4, so trying to bother the black queen. So somebody could also try this, kind of like saying, yeah, these pawns are not dangerous, they're doubled, there's no rook behind, they're not advanced, white has time to play something like this. And yeah, but basically, I don't think there's anything better than this. Just no way to repeat the position and grow. I don't really believe that white can try to, push for a win in this particular position. So that is basically what happens here. This variation after the precise move g3 by white. Yeah, so knight e5 is just kind of a simplifying idea, and it doesn't have many fans among the stronger players, but e4 does. So e4 actually can be a real deal, but even here, as I argue, and show some lines here, yeah, bishop e7, bishop c4, this position is just nothing to be afraid of. Castle's the main move. Knight g5, then we play queen e8. This is the key, and some tries, but mostly like there's just like just not much. So knight g5 itself is kind of a dubious attempt. Like, yeah, there's just nothing to be afraid of here. If queen f5, now we take this knight. Bishop has to take, otherwise we grab on e4 if the queen takes. Knight e5 exclam, bishop e2 and d6, simple way to play. Yeah, now the discomfort can be felt, and we basically just go and grab the piece here. So this is big advantage, obviously. So that is just not a move. H4 may be visually appealing because trying to, show some kind of initiative. There's some basic plausibility, there could be something here. But after the precise knight d4, only black can be better. Knight d4 exclam, basically controlling the f5 square. Like white's idea was queen f5 and some kind of a bishop g5 hg. But I mean, yeah, knight d4 is just good enough to controlling this square, placing an additional threat. Castles now basic d6, bishop d3, rook b6, and black basically with a fantastic position. Bishop f6 with big advantage. So yeah, just kind of the knight g5 is too active. Yeah, there's just not much behind here that white would have. Let's say white realizes, knight g5 is basically tempting bishop g5, but we don't do that. We play the queen e8 move. Castles, and d6. Bishop f4, now h6, and white just has to go back, and the most basic of moves. Now looks a little bit like we could put some very heavy pressure, but actually that doesn't lead anywhere due to the move queen e2. So, it's not like black is really taking over, but comfortable equality again. b3. Now, of course, there's no bishop d6. Well, the simplest is this, but also knight b4. b3, knight b4. Queen e2 takes, and queen b5. Okay, fd1, rook d8. h3 draw in a Farrell Gonzalez Mendoza Brasilia 22-3. So yeah, again, basically draw here. Yeah, I don't think black, like neither side actually can push this realistically. Has a very drawish tendency to it. That was castles. But again, that was just like the dubious attempt The immediate castle here on move 12 is much more challenging, but even here, we are totally fine. So the key is to basically play rook to b6, and yeah, the resulting positions I will take a look at in just a second are also totally fine. And now white usually resorts to two options. One is knight g5, one is bishop d2. We'll consider both. Let us start with this move, bishop d2, b6, and bishop c3. So just kind of a effort to remaneuver the bishop onto a more active square. Yeah, so basically, because this pointedness could lead to some trouble, but again, there's just not that much of this trouble. We can easily neutralize that by bishop f6. So this is exclaimed. There's no fancy e5 moves. It's just too much. We would run into bishop e6 with this problem. So white has nothing better than retreat, queen to e7, rook a d1. And so basically, this variation can be largely thought of as trying to find the correct placement for the pieces with black, as they're not so obvious from the first sight. Like they are a little bit scattered here, and white, has seemingly easier ways. These pieces are like more natural squares. So in that sense, some practical edge that white has. Engine shows basically throws zeros here in these positions, and there is always enough counterplay for black to claim equality. So here, bishop c3, queen takes, bishop g4 is the most precise, and b3. Yeah, this move we see as well, white is trying to secure the b file. This rook is both defense and attack. So yeah, quite a good placement here. Although after b3, it might start getting in, kind of like lagging behind and just out of play. So that could be maybe some source of problems, but yeah, it's just not a big deal overall. a5. I don't think we have knight d4, because knight takes. If cd, then rook takes, of course. And knight takes, bishop d1 runs into perhaps knight f5, if I'm not mistaken. Knight f5. Oh yeah, and bishop d. Oh, sorry. Of course, there's obviously the checkmate. I missed that. Yeah, so there's none of that. Yeah, we cannot go that active. But yeah, a5, just simple way to play. Rook fe1. Now we take, knight d4. Probably even knight e5 is good enough. These positions should also have a very drawish tendency. Yeah, and we've already seen some position of this kind earlier. Now f4, let's say queen d7, bishop d5, a4. And again, counterplay. I don't know what the result here was, but I mean, it's basically around equal. Thorndale, Brisbane, London 22-2. Yeah, so again, black went on to get a decent position. Maybe some f5 ideas or f6 could lead to decent play, right? Some kind of thing like of this kind. So yeah, so here not that big of a problem. Knight g5, and then queen e8. Again, we've seen a very similar position already, and again, there's just not much to be afraid of. So this is the driving idea. I mean, he's forcing us here. Bishop g5 is a mistake. Knight e5, and basically d5 is a threat, or d6. So bishop to d5, now we go d6, and h6. Now luckily there's no g5 for white, I think, because like knight g6 there, after these trades will just be taken because of the pin. Yeah, but we have a move that's just as good. Knight g6, queen g3, only move, bishop e6 is big advantage. It's just too many problems, like, this hanging. I think bishop d5, queen e4 is another idea. Yeah, so it's just basically big advantage. But bishop g5 is just a terrible move, obviously. Queen g5 is the way to go. Now d6, bishop d3, queen e5. And this ending, I guess, could be tried by some players, arguing there's pair of bishops and better pawn structure. But after actually I had a game here myself and bishop d7. My opponent did get some edge, so bishop d7 is actually not the best way to go. We'll see knight c6. That is just basically the key move, and just securing equality just about in every possible way there. But bishop, let's say bishop d7, rook d1, c4, for knight d3, takes. Yeah, and I thought there was like enough here, which there probably is, but like the play is just not that easy. Rook d3, rook e8. Yeah, I thought activity was like on my side. E5, bishop b5. Now I want to go de, so he plays rook d6, takes a rook e1 and a rook d1. That's my idea. Yeah, so it is equal. It is even 0-0, but yeah, it's just like these two pawns. Sometimes there could be some problems. So a4, bishop c6, king e3, f6. Yeah, I think there's a way to do this. Bishop d2, q1 and d7. Obviously, right? Yeah, so f6, b3, king f7, getting closer to the pawn. g3, king e6. Yeah, so bishop b2 will be a draw. b4, bishop d7. Note that I cannot take king d6 because of the discovery. f5. Now, yeah, king back to f7. And now I realize that there's some practical problems left. b4, takes, bishop d2, h6. Yeah, so I think I could have played h5 is the better way to go. Here, my opponent does get the edge after a5 in chess.com Blitz 22-3. I went on to actually draw this game, but not without adventures. And yeah, actually, I think I went through a losing position at one point, but like a very, very difficult for him to find. Yeah, so there's no point to really get into here. Again, this bishop d7 is just not the way to go. Knight c6. I just kind of forgot my theory here. And knight c6 would have been much more effective. b3. Now, I think both are fine, like knight d4, bishop d3, a5. e3, bishop e6. Yeah, although maybe this one could, I guess, get us in trouble because of this structure here. Takes cd, rook of d1, now g6. He goes anyway, bishop d7. Yeah, and the problem is like for white is like not easy to actually get to this pawn. We always have like a rook b4, a4, try to, so let's say takes bishop c4. Yeah, and this is just kind of more than enough counterplay because of this pin. So we are, active here after all. And yeah, so again, drawish tendency. But I'm sure there's some versions of this endgame where if we lose this, it's basically almost lost. So, so this is one way to try. But maybe the more precise kind of a way should be the move a5. And yeah, here, rook d1. Now knight d4 on the bishop. Bishop d3 and bishop a6 is very, very equal. And that the reason is that, yeah, so like he doesn't get to take on d4, has to play bishop e3. Now we take. Now, of course, if bishop d4, we have bishop e4, it's better for black. So rook d3, knight c2. If rook c1 takes, f6, f4. Yeah, and a super drawish rook ending, rook a8. So kind of white realizes that he doesn't want to get pressure down here. It's like the king f7, king e6, or e7, I'm going to defend this pawn. Yeah, it's tough to play for a win. He liquidates this. a4 now is precise. I think otherwise, yeah, probably de also should be fine, although de, rook c5, okay. So yeah, maybe, well, no, even that should be fine. But let's say a4 is a little bit better. ed takes, rook c5, rook d2 equal. So yeah, this should be by all means a very, very a drawish position. Yeah, not easy to demonstrate any kind of an edge, in this type of position. And same is the case if rook a d1, knight e3. Let's say fe, and he's kind of happy to play e5 if we play rook d8. And yeah, so here, maybe he can hope for advantage, but then we play a4, rook d6, and rook b4, and this is more than enough. Rook d3, a takes, c4, by far the easiest. And of course, bc4, rook c4, you really cannot imagine, white playing this for a win for too long. Yeah, so this is super drawish, and yeah, basically is most likely outcome. So yeah, so basically this, like I said earlier, yeah, this particular variation has a super drawish tendency. This b6, we consider that in relatively deep detail. Just to kind of recap quickly, e6, yeah, basically de is not scary, but also we need to know about it. Knight c3 leading to this key position where it branches out to two options. Here there's knight e5 and e4. E4, yeah, is probably the more ambitious way to play, and I guess black's only practical problem is that the pieces are developed in a non-standard manner, and if we go wrong, then yeah, of course, then white can grab some kind of an initiative, some kind of a way to get an edge. But if we properly develop the pieces and are good to go with queen e8 move here after knight g5, then yeah, there really is absolutely nothing to be afraid of. So thank you very much for listening. That was our chapter 4, where we started considering the force cb5, and we'll be off to a very exciting another sideline 5 move e3 in the next chapter, chapter 5. Thank you.